Welcome to Grapple Arts Radio.
Hi everybody, it's Stephan Kesting from grapplearts.com and Grapple Arts Radio. Today we're going to be talking to John Perretti, and I'm really excited about this conversation because John was the matchmaker for the UFC way back in the day, and he's got lots of good stories and lots of insight into how these matches were set up and the evolution of the sport. Some of the most important early matches, the Frank Shamrock and Tito Ortiz type matches, were set up by John. Of course, he also worked with Extreme Fighting, which was one of the best organizations of its day. And we're really going to get a lot out of John. I'm really going to pick his brain. And he's also been a very outspoken advocate in the whole issue of brain injury and concussion in mixed martial arts and combat sports. So let's get started. How are you doing, John? Where are we finding you today? Where are you?
I am in Los Angeles, California.
And you're just on your way to your other place of residence in Mexico, is that right?
No, I think I'm going to be here 2.5, 3 more weeks before I go down to La Paz, Mexico.
Okay, world traveler. So I'm really a fan of the early UFC, and you were the matchmaker. So what was involved in setting up matches? Would you just keep your ear to the ground, or would people come and give resumes to you, or how did you go find these people who wanted to go and step into the cage?
The UFC put Extreme Fighting out of business. So the day after Extreme Fighting went out of business politically and was taken off pay-per-view and there was really no way to move forward, I got a call from David Isaacs for Bob Meyerowitz for me to meet them to be the matchmaker for the UFC. And I don't recall the exact UFC that I took over. The other matchmaker was fired, and he was fired for interesting reasons that I can't go into. So with my entrance into the UFC, being hired to be the matchmaker to the UFC and sometime color commentator, I was bringing in my little bag of goodies, fighters, gloves, which Dr. Aswanik and I designed and built and invented.
Yeah, you designed the first MMA glove, did you not?
Yes, with Dr. Aswanik.
Okay.
And with that, I brought my rules, my rounds, and my weight classes from Extreme Fighting. Not all that were adopted too quickly and with great difficulty from my former boss, Bob Meyerowitz, who I admire greatly, and we're still friends and we still chat on occasion. But it was a very difficult time, and Bob had a lot of people in his ear. It was very difficult to implement a lot of the things that I was already doing in Extreme Fighting into the UFC. Prior to me entering the UFC, to me, the UFC was just a spectacle. And a lot of people want to forget Extreme Fighting because it predates all that is so current today and is accepted as being, new age, when indeed it happened a long, long, long time ago in the United States of America. So what I'm trying to say is that I'm not responsible for the purposeful mismatches of the early UFC, where people asked how much you weighed, and that was your reason to get on the show. There was no pyramidal format by which people were selected to be able to compete for championships, which interestingly today there is no pyramidal, selection process either, in my opinion. Therefore, some, pro wrestler could just walk in and be awarded a chance to fight for a championship. Anyway, so this process had to be broken down, and it had to be broken down really quickly because I was on the spot. I wanted more weight classes. I wanted women in the sport. Bob did not. And, in Bob's defense, he was under a lot of pressure politically just to hang on. And if he had not sold to the Fertittas, then he would not have hung on, and he would have gone the way of Extreme Fighting.
You mean the Fertittas of Zuffa, which currently run the UFC?
I would say they own the UFC.
Okay.
I don't know who actually runs the UFC.
All right.
It's a vast question, and it's a labyrinth, I'm sure, of levels and changes of being that I don't know nor want to understand. What I'm trying to say here in this long run-on sentence is that those mismatches that Horian put together for his relative in his pajamas was not what I wanted the sport to be. And, when people say that we didn't have any idea that we were creating a sport, that's a lot of nonsense. I have been doing what I coined in the 70s as mixed martial arts for a long, long, long time, since 74. So I understand, that I've been wearing a gi a long, long time. In fact, someone from Gameness wrote me the other day that, don't I have a prototype of the Gameness gi? I said, absolutely, I do. So if you put someone who came to the United States as a purple belt and put him, as a black belt into a ring with a bunch of guys who couldn't tie their shoes, a Lebelian phrase, the results are really purposeful mismatch. And that's not what I was doing in extreme fighting, and that's not what I was doing when I took over the UFC as the matchmaker. I was creating a sport.
So then where did you actually get people? Because at the time, when people were competing in this, I think to some extent they were unsure if they were actually going to survive. I think the people who stepped into the ring, especially for the first 3 UFCs, they really had no idea of what this sport or this spectacle was going to be like. So where did you find people willing to do this? I guess it caught on pretty quickly after the UFC had been around for a year or two.
Well, again, there's a delineation for me. There's the first 4 extreme fightings, and then there's, the debacle of the second, and then there's the beginning right after that of me taking over UFC as a matchmaker. You can see that there's a radical difference between the time that I took over as a matchmaker and the show that came before it. Basically, what David Isaac said and Bob Meyerowitz said, that I was the perfect man for the job, and that they were dissatisfied with the guy that was doing this before and the methodologies, however unsound, that they were utilizing then. But so I have to tell you that break, is very important. I was traveling the whole world on the mat, trying people out. We had tryouts at 109 West 26th Street, one of my schools. We had tryouts in the Hamptons, in another school in Riverhead, Long Island. I traveled all over. I was in every dojo and every kwoon and trying to get guys from everywhere to fight. And, there were a lot of reasons that good matches were made and bad matches were made. I'm not proud of all the matches I made, but we were working on a very limited budget. And politically, I was traveling the talk show circuit, between Geraldo and Sally, Jesse, Raphael, and Donahue, and, people that you don't even probably remember. But I was all over, trying to promote this as a sport. And it was very, very difficult, I can tell you, in those days to do so and to endeavor to persevere.
Mm-hmm. Well, where did you get the idea of the rounds and the weight classes? Did that come from boxing for you?
No, not for me. I was frustrated as a stand-up fighter. I did Taekwondo and competed all over, and then I was a kickboxer, and then I got my black belt from Gene LaBelle. I'm one of Gene's 4 original black belts, along with John Donahue, John Lewis, and a guy named Silverado, a Brazilian guy, and myself. So I was very frustrated with the way things would go. I would kick somebody and knock them out, and they'd hold them up to get the trophy, and I would get second place. Things just didn't make sense for me, and they never did. Rounds were very, very important because you needed to, recuperate a fighter, and you needed to understand that the fighter had to understand the rules going into the fight, not some have ridiculous notion about one guy fights another guy, and then when he wins, he gets a new fresh opponent. I mean, that dates back to the gladiator ring, where a fresh opponent is thrown up against the guy after he's fought, a fight or two already. That system, that amateur system, didn't work for me, and it never has. I was forced to by my partners in the first extreme fighting, but we got rid of it soon after, and we became a professional format. A professional format means that you fight X number of rounds, and you're going to fight X number of rounds, and you know who your opponent is unless he backs out because of injury or fear, which happened a bunch. And it would be a professional format. So that's the way the rounds worked, and I decided by using people like Zinoviev, to understand what rounds and how much time I needed to recuperate guys, and so on and so forth. So it was a very quickly moving system of this works and that doesn't. Let's get rid of it. A kind of a Darwinian system of sports making.
Mm-hmm. Well, why did you bring in the gloves? Was that to give it the semblance of to make it more politically acceptable, or was it for a reason to protect the fighter's hands, or what was the reason for introducing the MMA glove to the sport?
It was really simple, to protect my hands.
Mm-hmm.
Had nothing to do with anything else. A guy couldn't walk in there, and be retarded and throw this big hard right hand, have a broken hand, and our fight ends. I've had 21 fractures of my right hand from bare-fisted fighting. You should see it. I mean, it's horrendous. It barely closes. The metacarpals on the outside are so short. It looks deformed. I can't use my hands very well to this day just because of that. I didn't want anyone else, to have to deal with things like that.
Okay.
We created a beautiful glove, and it was in 4 sizes, so it had to be adjusted for size and weight also. Dr. Swanik was instrumental in that, by the way.
Do you think that introducing the glove made it more palatable to the lawmakers who were busy? At this point, people forget how many jurisdictions wanted to ban the sport, and how basically jurisdiction after jurisdiction was saying, "Not in my jurisdiction."
Well, I'm a pugilist person. Okay, so I didn't give a shit about that. Donald Zuckerman cared about that. My partner, he was the lawyer who really I owe everything to, to be able to be creative and allow me to be creative, to do things and create a sport. I didn't care about that at all. It was human cockfighting, and it was, I went to prison in Montreal for Extreme Fighting 2, which I flew back for to be with my fighters who got arrested, and turn myself in. It was a long time ago, and Eddie Goldman on No Holds Barred, we've discussed this over and over again, and people want to forget. Mythologies, national mythologies, are very prevalent, and people don't really understand what occurred and when it occurred. And, a lot of these young people who watch this thing today, they believe the bullshit, and, they don't understand what it took to really put together a sport like this.
Well, what do you think that they mistakenly believe? What bullshit are they believing in?
Well, belief is what is beloved of you. You choose to believe in things, and now that they have such a juggernaut that runs this sport, they believe what they've been told, that certain individuals created these things, and that we before we didn't know what we were doing, and we had no idea that we were creating a sport. And so, with that in mind, when you say UFC, you get one person's name, and that's it. And my kids come home from school, I have two kids that are Olympic weightlifters, and they come home from school and they said, "Oh, my father did that," and they said, "What?" "Well, my father did that. He made that match." What? And they don't believe them. They don't believe my own children. There's people that that call me up and say, "Hey, John, I'm at a bar in Houston, and I got a guy. He said he fought for extreme fighting in the UFC. What's his name?" "Oh, so and so." I said, "Well, tell him he's full of shit." He goes, "I'll get John Perretti on the phone here. He wants to talk to you." And then the guy runs out of the bar. There's humorous anecdotes, but a lot of it is quite disgusting. But again, it's the version of the victors.
Well, why do you think then, and I'm not arguing with you, I'm just interested in your perspective on this, that the UFC is currently so big? It's gigantic, right? I mean, it's got franchises and video games and movies, and it's a lot. I don't know where it stands relative to boxing and pro wrestling exactly, but it's gigantic. So why is that now?
Well, they are the Barnum and Bailey of promotions. They've done an amazing job. Now, of course, it was nice to have $50 or $60 million to throw around to be able to do that job. I knew we needed a television show. I spoke to Cal Cooper years ago, and I said we need a television show weekly for people to understand what we're trying to do here, but we just didn't have the resources, and the political climate was so against us. Being the power elite of Las Vegas didn't hurt either. It doesn't really matter, my take on that. What really matters is that the historical aspects of it, are sound, and they are, written in stone now instead of my graphite gestures that I made on a blackboard, 15 years ago.
I think it's hard to underestimate the importance of the Ultimate Fighter TV show on the success of the UFC. I think that one show was a huge part of the turnaround, and really allowed people to connect to fighters and have sort of an emotional investment in a fighter as opposed to just seeing the person once every 6 months on a card.
Yeah, well, I spoke to those guys, and they said that, basically, we created the UFC, and the UFC created us, so, you can look at it, as a symbiotic relationship, very simply. One hand washed the other, so to speak. And, again, I attribute, a lot of that with having unlimited funds and the need to utilize money, and throw it at a sport. Again, it's not really important how they did it, and it's not an interview for me. What really is to be keyed on for me is that it happened at A, B, C, and D, and it didn't happen because someone took over the organization. And with that takeover of the organization, when I chose to quit, unlike John McCarthy said I was fired in his book, I wish he would have conferred with me on that. I have tremendous respect for John McCarthy. But I was not fired. I quit, and I was in Italy at the time. I quit over the phone. I was doing Gangs of New York. And the reason I quit is because, very simply, they wanted to use my name as a matchmaker in a very different way than I wanted it to have it used. I thought that I could stand on what I had done and my support for fighters and my ability to make matches, which, as Meyerowitz has said in print and on Eddie Goldman's show, matchmaking is an art; it's not a science, and that's what I did. What I'm trying to really say is that the reason I did not want to work, even being an Italian American, for this organization was because they were going to own the fighters. And if you own the fighters, you own the results.
What do you mean by owning fighters? Let's just be clear about this for the listeners.
If you own the fighters. If you have what they wanted to do, told me they wanted to do, is that they wanted to basically manage, represent, and juggle the fighters the way they wanted to juggle the fighters. It was something I was not interested in, because to be impartial is very, very important. Now, I've been accused of not being impartial, but that's very simple. Once I make the match, if one of the guys in the ring, Root and Randleman comes to mind, and I'm ringside and cheering for Boss, I can't be held responsible for my emotions at that time. When I make the match and it's signed, then I am out of it. I've done my job impartially. I've given my friend at the time, Boss Rutan, the hardest match of his life, and a great match for Randleman, and I'm done. So now I am just somebody who's watching the fight.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not impartial. I mean, that's not me being prejudiced in any way, shape, or form. Once the fight is made, then I'm free to react any way that I choose to, or if it's an emotional situation, that in which it was, then I can, be myself, so to speak, separate from the professionalism of making the match. Am I being clear?
I think so. I mean, of course, you're a human being, and you know these people. Of course, you're going to be emotionally invested in when they're actually in there trying to beat the other fighter.
And also, I come as a fighter. As Valid said a long time ago, he goes, there's only two people in this sport on this level that come to it as a fighter first, and that's him and myself. So,
because of your background in the combative sports, are you saying that's why?
Absolutely. As a fighter, I came to it. I was brought to extreme fighting, to originally be a referee. And then Donald and I hit it off, and we started talking about what this show was going to look like. And I was like, oh, God, that's ugly. Oh, that's silly. Oh my God. Richard Crudo came up with the first idea about doing Battlecade. And he deserves all that credit. Now, I come to it from a very different point of view than some, pencil neck, who decides that, they're going to start doing a fight show.
Mm-hmm. Well,
what I'm trying to say is that I have a very different perspective than someone who, did not dedicate their life to this prior to doing it.
Well, when you were doing this matchmaking, either in extreme fighting or the UFC, what were some of the favorite matches that you set up, and why? Like, why did you think that they were good matches?
Well, let me preface this. I had 16 concussions, and I don't remember a lot of the matches that I made. But a prime example of something that I thought was going to be amazing was my introduction of lightweight class into UFC, which Bob Marowitz was totally against. He only wanted heavyweights. He thought that was the only way to attract attention. I disagreed with him then. I disagree with him now. And by the way, I had 5 weight classes in extreme fighting. It's just that it took forever for Bob to adopt that idea. So I came up with this amazing match. First I gave, Mikey Burnett, I found him in a rolling around, on the West Coast. And I thought he was amazing, I put a lot of time and energy into Mikey Burnett, which turned out to be a radical disappointment on my part. But so this guy was amazing, and I put him up against Eugenio Tadot because I thought that, it was going to be a guy who could wrestle and defend the takedown. And Tadot, could box, and Mikey could box fairly well. It was going to be a great match. I was really excited about it. He was the Gracie Killer, and it was going to be a great match. And it was an amazing match, which brought forward my idea, to put Pat Miletich, and Mikey Burnett together. And it was going to be I said to Bob, it was going to change the world because everyone was going to appreciate what a lightweight fight was going to be like. And I always said that big guys accept mediocrity very easily, and I stand by that today. Obviously, as a kickboxer, I was 139 at 5'10". So.
Just so you know, I'm over 200 pounds, so I'm terribly insulted right now.
Yeah, well, don't be insulted. It's only a telephone. Anyway, the situation is that as a smaller guy, and by the way, I grappled at 185. As a smaller guy, I really, really had disdain for really big guys. And when I started grappling, I really had disdain for them because I thought that they, didn't really work hard enough. And I had all kinds of conversations with everybody, Coleman and everybody, there wasn't really anybody that was except maybe Maurice Smith that, was exempt from my condemnation. So I got this fight together, finally, and had to twist Meyerowitz's arm. By the way, Meyerowitz boxed as a middleweight, and he still liked heavyweights, which I'll never understand. So I had this great fight out there, and I was like, wow, I'm so excited, and it was a bomb. It is the worst match I ever made. Those two. Mikey has his version of it in my book, and Pat has his version of it, and it was bad. It was like the underwear grabbing festival. Neither of them wanted to really push the envelope and move forward. And Pat's a good friend of mine, and still to this day. And so it was a disaster, and I always talk about that disaster because. Even though I thought it was going to be the most amazing thing ever, right, it was not. So, again, it's an art. It's not a science. And, I've tried to apply myself and do the best I can, at what it is I was doing at the time. And a lot of it was innovation because it had never been done before. But most of it was laying hands on on fighters. Rolling with everybody, got me in a position to understand what they really could do and what they couldn't do and how that could be juxtaposed against another fighter who probably stylistically was very, very different, and so there's a lot of fights that, that I love. I really like the fights where guys didn't talk to me for 2 years after a fight.
Really?
Like Randleman didn't speak to me. Coleman didn't speak to me. Guys wouldn't talk to me for years. They took it so personally that I did something, like that.
What do you mean? Give them a tough opponent?
Yeah, and then other guys would come back and go, John, if even who did I speak to? Tito had something nice to say about me in his UFC. What's it called? Oh, the Hall of Fame. That's a funny thing in itself. We could talk about, but. He said, if you didn't put me into that fight, so-and-so, I never would have gotten, where I was, you really pushed me,
Oh, you're talking the fight with Frank Shamrock that went on for 5 rounds?
Yeah, Frank said the same thing, he goes, John, I knew when you did match with me, I had a lot of work to do. I took it very seriously. You weren't fooling around. And then, Vanderlei, the axe murderer, I coined that, by the way.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. You can ask him. He doesn't remember my name, but he remembers that I was the matchmaker and I coined it. I found him on a beach, by the way. And guys wouldn't talk to me, and I really liked that because, I wasn't there to, make friends with everybody. I was there to give them the hardest matches of their life. I took that very seriously, that job.
What was the match that you most wanted to do but never did manage to get set up? What would have been the dream match of your career?
I don't know. Is it all 200 pounds? Are you sitting down?
Oh yeah.
How about Hickson Gracie versus anybody?
Yeah, that would have been the jewel in the crown, wouldn't it have?
How about Boss Rudin versus Hickson? That almost happened on a bus.
Oh really? Were you there?
Really? Yeah, I was there for a lot of stuff that you don't know about. Anyway,
you can't leave me hanging like that. What happened with Hicks and Gracie and Bus rooting on a bus?
I think ask Marco Huas, a really nice guy, by the way. Yeah, you should interview Marco about that. I'm out of touch with Boss. I haven't seen him since last year at a show where my boys were All-American championships were weightlifting, and I saw him giving a seminar. I think it's on YouTube, actually. But we've lost contact over the years. He's become a superstar, and we've lost contact. But great. There's great fights out there. That I always. There's a wish list that I wanted for a long, long time, but there's a lot of guys like I would have liked to mash against other guys, especially big mouths. I love big mouths because I really, really dislike the bully. So there's a lot of big mouths out there that I wanted to match that turned down fights. What about, I tried to get the Machados to fight for years. I got kicked out of Machado's school for starting extreme fighting, by the way.
Really?
I just saw Hegan about 6-7 months ago on Fabiano Iha's show that I did 2 times. Nice guy, Fabiano. I love training with him, by the way. There was, I wanted to match, actually, Hegan Machado against a lot of guys. I had him matched twice, and they backed out. I have a lot of respect for the family, but it was a very difficult time for me personally with them, and I couldn't get them to fight. And then when they politically exiled me, then it was difficult. And Gene brought me there, which was really, really strange. But yeah, my firstborn son's name is Luca LaBelle Perreti, by the way.
Oh wow. Okay, well, actually, something that you mentioned earlier got me thinking. You said you'd had 16 concussions, and the way I actually got in touch with you is through our mutual friend Eddie Goldman. I was talking to Eddie about the whole issue of concussion and brain damage not too long ago on his show. So, what do you think? Do you think that there's much of an issue with brain damage in mixed martial arts in particular? I don't think we'd have any argument that they're in boxing or in football. But what about MMA?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I coined the term the Anvil Factor. I can hit you in space, while you're standing up, and your head will go back. And that's basically why they put headrests in automobiles for rear concussions from, rear ending. But so I can hit you in space, and your head will fly through space and come back, and you'll bounce along your neck, and you'll take that shot. But when I lay your head on the ground and hit it, there's a compression that occurs, and that compression is like an anvil. If anyone remembers what horseshoes are, you take this piece of lead and you lay it on an immovable object, the anvil, and you hit it with a hammer, and it compresses and it changes form. It's captured between the surface and the hammer. Now the hammer is now my fist, the horseshoe is now your head, and the surface is the anvil.
Mm-hmm.
That okay? With in mind, that kind of a trauma can do incredible damage to you, and does. About 6 months ago, I was in L.A. and I ran into someone I recognized, and he was a fighter, and I won't mention any names, and I gave him his first 4 fights, maybe 5 actually, and he didn't recognize me. And of course, I've gotten older and more frail, but my eyes are working, and I knew exactly who he was, and I said hi, and then he was like, who are you? And I was like, oh, I'm John Perretti. He didn't get the name, and then I said, gave you your first fight against so and so, and your second, and your third, and I probably couldn't remember the 4th one. He was like, you did? I said, yeah, I did. Remember we had at blah, 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 blah. Nothing.
That's scary.
I'm talking about this kind of stuff can go on a lot. And this is only one individual who, like myself, slurs his speech and like myself, has cognitive problems, especially with short-term memory. So I'm trying to say is that I retired a lot of guys. You know, I'd walk into an office and I'd say, Bob, so-and-so can't fight anymore. He'd go, why not? I said, have you talked to him? I said, have you looked at him? I said, he's slurring his speech. He walks funny. He can't remember things. He speaks weird. You know, I mean, this guy has problems. We need to stop fighting him. Someone's going to get hurt, and it's going to be him, and then you're going to get in trouble. And, you know, agreed and disagreed, but I retired a lot of guys, and I said, nope, you can't fight anymore for me. You go fight somewhere else maybe, and you get away with it, you know, like in boxing, but you're not fighting for me anymore. And when I left, they brought some of those guys back.
So what can we do, or what can the promoters do and the event organizers do to reduce this problem, to make it not so much of an issue in MMA?
Remove striking on the ground.
That would be a hard sell, I think.
You didn't ask me what was a hard or easy sell.
This is true. I mean, part of the big problem is that you can't tell definitively when brain damage is beginning to occur except via an autopsy. And I don't think, you know, having autopsies before a fight would be very politically acceptable either.
That's terrific. But you're forgetting about the training that goes into the fight. You know, I mean,
for sure.
I probably broke more hands in and had more concussions in training than I had in the actual fights.
Mm-hmm. Well, somebody pointed me in the direction of some research in boxing, which said that the decline in brain function is more linked to how hard you spar and how much you spar than to the number of times you've been knocked out in the ring. So it's part of accumulation of blows. Mm-hmm.
Accumulation of blows is what made me say that mixed martial arts was much safer than boxing. In fact, it was safer than college football. But I was wrong, and I always admit when I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm. Do you think early martial arts or early mixed martial arts was safer than modern mixed martial arts? No. Or do you think that there's not enough data to tell?
Not necessarily. Well, you're asking my personal opinion, right? Since I was there from early day one, and I fought bare-fisted, and I fought in no-rules fights. I mean, I didn't run into a John Lober, thank God, but I think that it's the same. It's very, very dangerous, and progressively you're going to see it. You know, yeah, guys don't have a vocalization about it. You know, guys aren't going to be able to speak about it like I can, but you're going to see that it's going to become more and more dangerous. It'll get covered up just like the NFL's been covering things up for years and years and years. I
think we'll see Zuffa and Dana White named in lawsuits in the next 5 to 10 years. Probably there'll be some class action lawsuits. And I'm not against banning mixed martial arts. I think if you want to take that risk, you should be free to take that risk. But I think you should be informed about that risk. You should know in advance what the potential consequences are, that you essentially could end up with something that looks an awful lot like Alzheimer's when you're 40, 45 years old.
Well,
and if you're willing to accept that, then fill your boots.
I understand what you're saying, and you're putting it down as a moral issue, and I can be on both sides of that moral issue. I can tell you that you have every right to commit suicide because you have the right to commit suicide. You as a person are allowed to do that. Okay, you know that you're going to be dead afterwards, and I think you have every right to do that. Now, some people would say they have no right to commit suicide. So I can look at it from both sides of the fence. What I'm trying to say here is that you're going to be in a position where, starting when you're young, right? Everybody when they're young, the best soldiers in the world, you know, are 18-year-olds.
They think they're going to live forever.
Exactly, and no one understands that. You know, at 40 years old, all of a sudden I started to develop problems. I lost all my hearing in my right ear in one day, right? I started throwing up. I started having vertigo. I didn't know that when I was 17 years old and knocking people out and throwing vertical side kicks and knocking people out and thinking Bill Wallace was the greatest thing since sliced bread. I didn't know that, that when I fought, for championships, I won lightweight championships, and I have to fight for the grand championship, some genius's fucking idea, right? That the lightweight guy fights the heavyweight guy, and then I get concussed. That I was going to end up in a hospital and not remember what happened in the second round, and then you say, well, this, that, and this happened in the second round, and I go, oh, okay. What happened in the second round? And they go, John, we just told you, that this, and that happened in the second round, and you go, oh, okay. But what happened in the second round? No one told me that. No one told me that. So on the second side of the fence, the side that I'm jumping onto now, I'm telling you that you're wrong. It's not about that, because you tell a little kid who's playing football, they have to get in the bull ring, right? And I was a strength and conditioning coach for football for a while, and I quit. He's got to get in the bull ring, and he's got to go up against all the big guys, and they come charging at him, and they crush him. And then you got to do it again and again and again and again and again, and you're not allowed to have any water that day and stuff. And then, you look at that and you go, wow, the money, the glory, the this, the that, And it's an escalator. Guys get on the escalator, they get off the escalator. More guys get on the escalator, get off the escalator. So, maybe you're right, and you can say, oh, well, everybody knows what's going to happen. You're going to get fucked up, but it's worth it because you can make that choice. But you see that that information isn't out there. Mm-hmm. I didn't know at 40 that this was going to happen to me, and now I'm 57. Okay. And, I can hear my speech is different than it was even 2 years ago.
Well, if you have these serious concerns, and you say that, and I think you have a point, saying that 17-year-olds don't really have any sense of what it's going to be like to be 40 or 50, right? That seems like an eternity away, and we'll deal with it when we get there. So then, what is the solution? I mean, one obvious solution, we say, okay, we're going to get rid of this sport.
Again, I don't have a solution. I mean, I can't read, into the future. It's not something I can do. I don't know anyone that can. Even the fortune tellers say they can, but I don't believe they can. Mm-hmm. So I don't have that answer that you're pushing me for here. I do not watch mixed martial arts any longer. I have no interest in it. I don't watch golf either. It just doesn't interest me. I think the grappling arts is something that's going to go further and further and further and probably get more and more acceptable. By the way, you didn't mention the Contenders. Contenders was a show that I produced in between with Donald Zuckerman, in between Extreme Fighting and the UFC. And the Contenders was the first true grappling show that no one ever saw. And it was martial artists versus world-class wrestlers. And it was a submission show. Unfortunately, I lost $200,000 doing it, and it didn't get repeated. But it went on to become Abu Dhabi, and it went on, and they had tremendous backing. And Japanese took the idea and the name and did the Contenders show for 10 years also. The reason I bring that up is because I think that kind of thing will continue, and submission shows will become more and more popular as head trauma becomes more and more obvious to everyone, in the future.
Was that the show that Randy Couture competed in? I'm trying to place it.
Well,
who were the names?
Frank Shamrock, Dan Henderson, Andre Vinderes.
That's okay. The big names at the time.
Townsend Saunders. I think I put Tom Erickson on that show. We had an incredible cast, and it was a great show. And it was a show that no one saw. And you, and what you do, it's almost mandatory that you see this show.
I vaguely remember. It was a long time ago, and like you, I've been hit in the head a few times as well. I vaguely remember Tom Erickson fighting in a submission based tournament.
Actually, if you Google, it's really funny. If you Google Frank Shamrock and Dan Henderson, Contenders will come up, but everyone thinks it's mixed martial arts.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll definitely put a link into that, the results of my Google search when I post this interview.
If you go to, Wikipedia, they don't even know what the Contenders is. See, the problem is that, that when I leave something, I really leave. I don't really look back a lot. People want me to look back, and I don't do that. I try to move on and continue with my life and do other things, and I don't have any regrets about moving on in that sense. But to get back to your question, I'm not saying that this should be banned, or boxing should be banned, or any of this stuff, or pro football should be banned. I actually watched 5 minutes of it the other day for the first time in a year. I think that there'll always be an attraction to violence, even if it's the greatest Super Bowl ever, and there's a fight breaks out in the stands, no one's watching the game anymore. Mm-hmm. So, I'm attracted to violence, and always have been. We're different kinds of people, out there. But this as a sport today, I have no interest in. Well,
what is in your personal future, just as we're wrapping up the interview here, what are you working on, and how can people follow what you're up to?
Well, I have a blog. I don't use it a lot. I've been writing a book for a year and a half, and a lot of that is going to be involved with these kinds of discussions and tons of interviews that I've been doing. I'm going to move to Japan in March of next year, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be coaching there. I'm a nationally ranked Olympic lifting coach, and which has no head trauma.
Only if you do it extremely poorly.
Okay, some people have been hit on the head. I have, but not badly. I continue to work with my kids, and I am really proud of my contribution to this thing called mixed martial arts, even if no one seems to remember it or denies it. I feel really good about what I did. I also, for the first time, if I may say that, since 1974, I promoted 2 people to black belt this week. Charles Martone, actually Dr. Charles Martone, and Dr. Peter McGuire were promoted to black belt this week in my system, Dao Jutsu Do.
Oh, well, congratulations to them.
Yep, I congratulate them.
Can you just give us a little hint of what you're going to be talking about in the book, and sort of, is it behind-the-scenes stuff from early MMA?
Well, it's actually what it took to become, in my opinion, the thing that I became, and how, no matter how divergent the things may be in my lifestyle that pushed me into this direction. It is what it is. It's autobiographical. It's nonfiction, and been working really hard on it. And a lot of people have been very helpful, giving me interviews and their remembrances of different things that have happened. And I'm really enjoying the writing of it and the process.
Well, I look forward to reading it, John. Thank you so much for your time today.
Hey, thank you, and thanks for, keeping me alive here.
Podcast listeners, if you're listening, there's a good chance that you're into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I hope that you are. It's the best martial art out there. But nevertheless, if you do Jiu-Jitsu, if you do grappling, if you do MMA, I've got a book out there. It's called A Roadmap to BJJ, and it covers the fundamentals of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It covers the techniques and the positions. It's got checklists. It's a super useful resource, and it's completely free. If you go to grapplearts.com/book, you can download it. It's also on Amazon Kindle where you can buy it if you want to go that way, but I'm going to suggest the free route, which is grapplearts.com/book. Check it out. I get feedback almost every day from people who found this super useful in finally getting through and understanding the ground game, and it finally making sense for them, and it finally not being so intimidating anymore. Check it out. I think you'll find it really useful too.